吃过了？
我吃过那个鸡腿。
ACE 吗？
不是，
大大。
好大大。
我从来没吃过那个，我不喜欢吃炸的那个鸡。哎，你住哪儿？你也吃过吧？好。
Chapter 3 New Keynesian Model. Now,
他的表情。
Most people in the undergraduate should learn the old Keynesian model, right? So there's a new Keynesian must be a old Keynesian, right? Otherwise, how can people call it new? Right? That must be old. Now, if you remember, like in Econ 101, there's something called the simplest Keynesian model or the old Keynesian model is that you have something called the aggregate demand, right? So aggregate expenditure. Okay, you say your aggregate expenditure is C plus I plus GE plus net export, okay? And then you have a picture like you draw, maybe you plot against, let's say this is output, okay? You call this output Y. And then on the vertical, you say this is aggregate demand, and then you draw a 45-degree line, okay? And then you say, okay, you have consumption functions. You want to have this aggregate demand, so you draw it this way, okay? And then the slope is the slope of this thing is known as the marginal propensity to consume, okay? It's smaller than 1, okay? So like upon 6, for example, you say for each additional dollar, people tend to spend 60 cents, okay? And then you would, and then the output will be determined by this crossing point, aggregate demand equals to output, okay? And then what happens if people want to spend more, okay? Or maybe their firms want to invest more, or maybe people want to consume more. So you have an upward shift of the aggregate demand, okay? And then the output would increase, right? So the old Keynesian model sort of say this. So you increase government expenditure, then you have higher GDP, okay? So basically, now what this shows is that the output responds to demand, right? Or the aggregate demand. So in the old Keynesian model, output is passive. Supply side, or maybe put it this way, the supply side. The supply side is passive. What determines the equilibrium is the demand side. So and the motivation behind Keynes' idea is that because he wrote this model in the Great Depression in the 1930s. So in the Great Depression, for example, in the United States, the unemployment rate was as high as 25%. So at that time, the Great Depression, there are millions of unemployed workers, factories are unused, and then everything is empty, and therefore, but just nobody want to buy, okay? So nobody want to consume, firms don't want to invest, okay? So no demand, basically. So Keynes came up with, so Keynes' explanation of the Great Depression is that there's not enough demand. Supply is there, okay? Supply is everywhere, but just nobody buy. Okay, even though things are cheap, but nobody want to buy. So therefore, his prescription is, since it is very difficult to force people to buy or consume, and then firms may not listen, they don't want to invest. So the only possibility is fiscal policy, government spending, okay? Because government can directly control it. So hire free people, right? So the well-known joke, or right? You hire three people, one person to dig a hole, the other person fill up the hole, the third person pointing at the hole, supervise these two guys. Fiscal policy, right? Okay, so this government spending. Well, in a way, this might be appropriate. I mean, given the context of Great Depression. Okay, but anyway, the old Keynesian model is that you see the underlying assumption behind this old Keynesian model is that price is fixed. Okay, price doesn't change. Price fixed. And then, so therefore, nominal interest rate or real interest rate is just the same. Okay, so your price is fixed. Inflation rate is 0. So, and then the supply side is just react to demand. So this demand determined. Okay, so the output, the equilibrium output is demand determined. Now, in those models that we have been learning so far, we have demand side and supply side, right? So we always talk about supply of goods, demand for goods, and then we impose market clearing. And then the supply side of goods is determined by firms' profit maximization behavior and also people's labor choice, right? So supply side, and then the demand side, labor, people's consumption, demand, and so on, right? So we have this. So it's quite different. So but the thing is that so in the Keynesian model, you have this fundamental property. So the output is demand determined. If demand is high, output will be high. Okay, so output is demand determined. And now, if you want to have a model that has these Keynesian features, demand determined, okay, so you will emphasize aggregate demand, right? So if you want your equilibrium output to be demand determined, can you use the kind of model that we have been using so far? Okay, see the classical model, you have the perfect competition and so on. Probably not. Probably. See, you cannot use perfect competition anymore. See, suppose you just want to have a model that somehow would, the demand side will determine the output. Okay, then you have to use other market structure. You cannot rely on perfect competition. Okay, and the other things in the also Keynes, as I said, price is fixed, right? Price fixed. So price and wage fixed or downward rigid. So another key idea of Keynes is nominal rigidity, downward rigidity of wage. Okay, so basically says that people don't like wage cut. Okay, so even though there's a Great Depression, but people are unwilling to accept lower wage, and firms are unwilling to cut their price. Okay, so price rigidity. Okay, so basically you want to have some sort of nominal rigidity. Okay, so this is the second sort of key features of the Keynesian model. Now, if you also want to have this feature, again, you cannot use perfect competition anymore. Okay? So, you see, because in perfect competition, nobody choose price, right? You take price as given. Everybody takes price as given. You don't choose price. You take price as given. and then you choose your demand or you choose your supply, and then market clearing determine the price. So basically, you want to have a model that allow the agents to choose price. Okay, so perfect competition is out. So what can you use? Econ 101 told us there are other market structure, right? Okay, the other extreme is that how about one firm, right? So say monopoly. Monopoly choose price, right? So you choose price. Monopoly set a price as high as possible to maximize profit. Right? Choose price, and then if the demand, and for monopoly, if the demand change, it change the price and also the output, right? So it sort of satisfies these two features. But monopoly may be too extreme because we know in the world just cannot be one firm. So fortunately, then in between, we have something called monopolistic competition. So monopolistic competition, you have features of monopoly. Okay, each firm has some local monopoly power because it produces a good that is not the same as other goods. Okay, but then you also allow for many firms, right? So many firms, just like perfect competition. So a natural choice is monopolistic competition. So basically, in the new Keynesian model, if you want to have a full micro foundation, like the kind of model that we have been studying so far, you have utility maximizing consumer, you have profit maximizing firm, you have market clearing, and so on. So you have to give up perfect competition, and you don't want to go all the way for monopoly, then the only possibility is monopolistic competition. So that's why. Monopolistic competition. Now, monopolistic competition, we have you remember, or may not remember, your Econ 101, there's a very nice picture. Econ 101, so we have a nice picture like that, right? Okay. So monopolistic competition. So this is the demand curve. Okay, so the so-called AR schedule is the demand curve. So this you look at one firm. Okay, so this is a typical firm. Monopolistic competition, and the reason why you're facing a downward sloping demand curve is because of product differentiation, right? So you are selling a product that is unique, okay? It may be similar, but not the same as other firms, so therefore you have a downward sloping demand curve, just like a monopoly. And then you have these costs and so on and so forth. And then the profit maximizing firm will try to would try to, so from the demand curve, you can derive your marginal revenue curve, and then given your marginal cost, you determine your output. Okay, so you produce at this QS is your profit maximizing output, but then you charge a price as high as possible, as high as people are willing to pay for that much of output, right? Which is the point on the demand curve. So this is the price that you will charge. Okay, so the firm will choose price. So this part is just the same as a monopoly. So you have the kind of the same picture as the monopoly. So the important thing here is that the price has to be higher than marginal cost, just like the monopoly. Now, in perfect competition, this cannot be the case. In perfect competition, price has to be the same as marginal cost, but in monopoly or monopolistic competition, there's a so-called markup. Price is higher than marginal cost, as you can see here. Okay, so marginal cost higher than that. Okay, price. So this is the markup features. Okay, and then this is the so-called short-run equilibrium. Okay, so this short-run picture is the same as the monopoly picture, but then the long-run picture says that maybe new firms and so on. So this demand curve will shift so that you don't have. So the picture will kind of change, right? So it kind of change. Yeah. So the long run picture sort of looks like this. Okay. Right. So the long run picture is that your demand curve will because of new entry, competitions, and so on. So you will end up with a situation like this. Okay. So this just short. So short run will be just the same as a monopoly, and the long run you have this kind of things, but still you can see that the markup is still there, right? The markup, see the price higher than marginal cost. Okay, so this markup is still there. So this monopolistic competition. So here in the New Keynesian model, you need that. So we use this kind of things. Okay. So here the yeah. So this is just the second, right? So here the yeah, let me show you. I want to keep the picture. Just keep the picture. So here in the New Keynesian model, you assume monopolistic competitions. You have many firms, and then and we know monopolistic competition. The firms so each firm has certain local monopoly power, so that you cannot have just one good. Okay. So now in those models that we have been learning, you have perfect competition, so you're just one good, right? Homogeneous good, so just one good. But here you need to have many goods. So so the Stickless setup to model monopolistic competition. So basically you have a continuum of goods. Okay, so remember the Econ 101, right? So say a monopolistic competition, you have many goods, and they are close substitute, but they are different, but they are very close. You know, there are many goods, right? So they're pretty competitive. And here, so the way to formally model that is that, so here you have a continuum of goods. So each good is indexed by I in the unit interval. So here we have infinitely many goods, okay? So, and then so people consume all these goods, right? So consume infinitely many goods, and there's a aggregate. So you aggregate them up, okay? So this is called the CES aggregator. So all these many goods, they aggregate according to this to these functions, and then this 1 over epsilon is the, so this epsilon here is the elasticity of substitution between goods, okay? So so this is known as the Stiglitz model. It's a very famous model, okay? And so the model so if you look at this consumer problem, it's pretty much the same as before, right? So in those models that we have learned before, you have just one good, CT, and then you put PT, CT here. But now you just generalize, CT is a composite of all these differentiated goods, okay? And then these differentiated goods, they are substitutable, as described by this functions, okay? So with this, and then we can define the price and so on, and then the rest are just the same, okay? So here we try to keep it pretty much the same as before, using this same utility function. So this only difference here is that you assume this monopolistic competition. Okay, so people consume infinitely many differentiated goods. Okay, and then this is the so-called Stiglitz setup. And then we can define a price index. Okay, so because you have many goods, right? PTI. Okay, you have many goods, and then you kind of take an average, and you average up using this convenient functional form to calculate this price index. Okay. And then the nice things about this Stiglitz model is that the demand function, so you can see it's not obvious if you just go directly, try to solve this problem, right? So you have, presumably there should be a demand function for each good I, right? Okay, so you have many goods, and then you have this budget constraint, you have this utility function. In principle, you should be able to write down the first order conditions, and then you try to solve the demand function for each good I, okay? But it turns out to be quite hard if you want to do that, but if you can break up the problem into 2 steps, it's a lot easier. So basically the solution turns out you can solve the problem in 2 steps. Step number 1 is that you do the same thing as before. First, find out the aggregate consumptions. This problem is exactly the same as before, because you just choose the capital CT. So the same utility function, the same budget constraint, so the same solution, right? Same solution as before. No problem. So this one, right? Okay, so just the same. And given what you find in step 1, right? So here, presumably you have if you solve the problem in step 1, you should have the demand function for aggregate consumptions, right? Given what you find in step 1, you do the step 2. So step 2 is that, so where's this? Yeah, so step 2. Disappear. Yeah, step 2. Yeah, step 2 is here. Step 2. So given what you find in step 1, your aggregate consumption, and then you will allocate, okay? So given what you find here, and then just using this weight to determine each good I's consumption. So your this, you can think of this one is the Marshallian demand function for good eye. Okay, Marshallian demand function for good eye. And then in the lecture notes, I prove it for you. This really works. Now I'll just leave it to you, okay? But this is a well-known result. This is a well-known result. So this is known as the Stiglitz demand function. Okay? So with this nice functional form, okay? And of course this won't work if you don't choose this very nice functional form. You see this PT in particular, you have to make it very nice. You see this PT is PT is taking this kind of functional form, and then the aggregate consumption take this very nice functional form, okay, and it, based on all these things, you have a very good looking, so the solution make it, the functional form is very nice, okay. So this demand for good eye is proportional to the aggregate consumptions, and then the weight depends on this price I relative to the average price. Okay, so it will be something like that. Okay, so this is the solution. So this is proof, and I don't have time to go over it, but you can check. Okay, so I give you the proof here. The book in the appendix of the book, it tried to prove it, but I don't understand it. Okay, so I think it's just too brief. So I add in quite a lot of detail, and I hope that it sort of explain it. Okay. But anyway, the result is correct, but I add in a lot of detail. Okay. So this is the solution. Now the bottom line. So what is the bottom line here? So the bottom line here is that if you see in our application, now in our application actually, we are not particularly interested in the demand for any particular good eye, because in macroeconomics, we are interested in the total, right? The total consumption, total output, and so on, right? So what this thing says is as follows. Even though you generalize to monopolistic competition, but if you just look at the aggregate consumption demand, it is just the same as before. So after spending so much time, all we want to say is that you get exactly the same labor supply schedule and consumption Euler's equation as before, okay? Even though you don't assume perfect competition, you assume monopolistic competition. You get demand side is the same. Now the supply side will be quite different, but the demand side is the same in the aggregate. Now the complication came from the supply side. Because here your supply side is no longer just saying you have perfect competition, right? You have perfect competition and so on. Now you have monopolistic competition, so it's more complicated. And moreover, you also want to introduce nominal rigidity. Okay, basically you want to introduce nominal rigidity as motivated by Keynes, and it turns out that you need nominal rigidity. Now it turns out in order to have monetary policy to have real effect, and also the impact on monetary policy, at least in the short run, is consistent with what we observe in the real world, you need nominal rigidity. Okay? Otherwise, you don't. So basically, that's explain why in central bank all over the world, nobody use CIA model or money in utility, because if they use it, they get themselves fired. Okay, then it means central bank is not needed. Okay, so that's why in central banks all over the world, we need to use this model, the Keynesian model and so on. Okay. In academics, we kind of like both. Okay, but anyway, so here you have. So here we need to use those theory from monopolistic competition, right? So here you look at each firm. So a typical firm, right? Firm I, and then we try to keep the model pretty much like what we have been learning before, right? So no capital to make it simple. So just the same functional form as before, right? So Kaputa's production function, but this is for firm I. And then we will need, remember the monopolistic competition picture, right? So we have the demand curve, and then we have the marginal cost, and so on, right? So that's why now marginal cost, you need total cost, right? The differentiation of total cost is the marginal cost. So you need expression for marginal cost. So here, so marginal cost is by definition the derivative of total cost with respect to the input, and then there's a relationship between marginal cost and marginal product. Okay, so it's basically the reciprocal of marginal product. Okay, so here we showed, because this model is very simple, because there's only one input, right? The labor is the only input. We have no capital, no other input. So total cost is just the wage bill. Okay, and then we also assume this production function to be very simple, so that we can solve out the n in terms of y. Substitute here, because your cost function is a function of output y. Okay, so you need to kind of back out, okay, solve out the n in terms of output. Now, not always possible though, right? Because if you have more complicated functional forms, not possible. But for simple case like that, it is possible. And then you can find out closed form expression for marginal cost and so on, and then you can check that this is indeed the case. Right? So your marginal cost should be just wage over the marginal product. And everything is nominal, right? So so this wage is nominal wage, okay? Nominal wage, as in the model, as in the previous model. And here's the exciting part, or the complicated part, nominal rigidity. Now this is a famous result, again, called careful pricing. So here, nominal rigidity is modeled by this setup. So every time period, there is a lucky draw. And then a fraction of the firms, right? We have many firms in the unit interval. A fraction of them will be allowed, the lucky firms, okay? The lucky firms will be allowed to change price, set any price they like. The unlucky ones will have to keep their price. Okay, so there's a probability. So this probability is fixed. Okay, so every time period there will be a lucky draw, and then there's this probability theta. Those firms will, if they have to stick to the same price. And then 1 minus theta are those firms that is allowed to set price for next period. Okay? And then we know this from exponential distribution, the duration of price is 1 over theta on average. So the higher the theta, the more sticky is the price. So in particular, you can imagine, suppose theta is 1, nobody can change price, right? Price is perfectly fixed, like in the old Keynesian model, right? So this theta parameterize the degree of price stickiness. The other extreme, perfect competition, or no price, no nominal rigidity, right? So the theta is 0, everybody change price, right? Everybody change price. So you will go back to the classical monopolistic competition model. Now in the classical monopolistic competition model, there's no price rigidity. Okay, so here this careful pricing is a nice way to model price nominal rigidity, so that you will use these things, and then you can get. So you see here in this proof, we try to find out the aggregate price dynamics. See, the previous page show you at every time period, certain fraction of the firm will stick to the price, and then the rest of the firms can change price, right? They will change their, let's say, suppose their price is PT star, okay? PT star. So then here this page try to show you what will happen given this kind of behavior. What will happen to the aggregate price index? Okay, aggregate price index. So here it is, again, using our definition of aggregate price index and so on. So you will find a result that is very intuitive. So I show you the detail, but let us just look at the final results first. So you see here you have, so here we are talking about at the beginning of time t. Okay, so at the beginning of time t, there's a lucky draw. So as you can see here, the price level, the aggregate price level prevailing in period t will be a weighted average of these two terms. Now, the first term here is, you can see PT minus 1, right? And the probability, and this parameter is theta. And remember that theta is the fraction of firm that is not allowed to change price. That they will have to keep the old price, which is the last period price, right? So this is the result of those firms that has to stick to their old price. Similarly, the next term, as you can see here, 1 minus theta are those firms, are the probability of those firms that are allowed to reset their price, right? And suppose the price they would like to set for time t is PT star. So as you can see here, it's quite intuitive. Your aggregate price level as of for period t should be a weighted average of these two components, weighed by how many are those firms that will have to stick to the price, how many are not, okay?